January 28th. We'll call this meeting to order with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Councilman Cavanagh. Here. Councilwoman Perot.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Councilman Burnt.
Here.
Absent is Councilman Borton. And Mayor Simison.
Here. Item 2 is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move. Oh, sorry. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
we need to take off item 5A and reschedule it for a future meeting date. Unfortunately, our good director is a little under the weather, so we hope that she gets better soon and recovers well. And so item 5A will now be the shared vehicle report. And other than that, I move that we adopt the agenda as changed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as changed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item number 3, consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will go right into item 5A, shared vehicle response, that will be presented by Keith and Caleb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, Caleb and I are here today to talk about the process of going through the vehicle sharing program solicitation, the RFP that we issued, and I will go over the procurement phases, and then I'll turn it over to Caleb for some more detail. At council's direction, we issued an RFP on December 13th. We posted it on our website the same day. Caleb also sent the notification out to 7 specific vendors who we thought might be interested in it, had showed interest in the past. The RFP was left open for 31 days. On the 8th of January, we received a letter from Bird, our vendor from last year. Bird thanked the city for embracing them, but stated that they would not be proposing at this time, that the ridership was not enough to sustain a non-subsidized model. We did open proposals on the 10th. We did not receive any proposals to the 7 vendors we sent it to, but one from the southeast had picked it up off our website. They did propose. The name was Slider. We held an evaluation meeting on January 22nd. We had 7 folks, 3 city employees and 4 from the private sector. While the evaluation committee gave Slider a passing score, they did overwhelmingly recommend that we not issue a contract and believe that it was the right time. And that pretty much wraps up our solicitation efforts. I'll turn it over to Caleb to provide a little more detail from the evaluation committee perspective.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yeah, just a little bit more on what Keith just presented. So the scoring committee was generally satisfied with Slider's proposal. As to Bird's letter, our service contractor for last year, that was the main concern that the scoring committee had, is that the timing is just not right for our community to enter into a new contract. They were afraid that Slider would run into similar issues that Bird did, mainly because of the construction that's going on down here, and that there will be rooftops in the next year, 18 months, 2 years or so. But with all the construction going on all the roadways and in downtown, and us not having the entertainment venues for concerts and universities and those types of things, they just right now didn't think that now is the right time for our community to enter into a contract for this service. They did ask, and Keith and I did oblige, and we called Slider and had just a heart-to-heart with them and said, hey, just want to be upfront with you. You scored well, but the scoring committee asked us to call you and let you know that our last vendor respectfully declined to pursue our community at this time, and we just want to get off on the right foot with you and no surprises. So kind of let you know what you're getting into. They had not been to Meridian, so they don't really know our community and our layout, so we just wanted to sort of orient them a little bit with again, the lay of the land, if you will, there. They did appreciate that honesty. We actually received an email yesterday from them thanking us for their time and said, after they've looked at it a little bit more at our community, said they sent us an email stating that they would not be able to make it work with the current franchise fee model. So we weren't trying to necessarily scare them away, but that was the recommendation from the steering committee again, that we not enter into a contract, and we just wanted to have that conversation with them. We appreciated them taking the time to propose, but that would be our recommendation to you all this evening. The scoring committee further recommended that the MDBA kind of take it from here, if you will. And so Lindsay Boshar's here. She was on the scoring committee as well. I think she agreed to kind of monitor and track and basically bring that back to the mayor and city council when the MDBA thinks the timing is right. Again, the 18 months kept coming up at our scoring meeting, so roughly, between a year or two, to maybe put this back out there after we get, again, some rooftops downtown and things potentially. But that was the scoring committee's recommendation, was to have the Downtown Business Association kind of monitor and say, you know what, we think we're ready now to maybe enter into that contract. So Lindsay is here. I think, if you have any questions for her, I'm sure she'd be willing to answer them. But that's kind of what the scoring committee's recommendation was this year. And what we're carrying forward on behalf of the scoring committee is that we not offer or award any contract at this time.
Thank you, Caleb and Keith. Council, are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I just wanted to say thank you to Caleb and your team and everyone that was involved in this process. Keith, it doesn't surprise me, number one, from my take from the beginning, although I've always felt that these e-scooters can be a valuable, and a fun amenity, service, whatever, from the private sector to our community. I've been, generally speaking, I've had a lot of positive, experiences in other cities and across. I rode on Lime when I was in Portugal, in Lisbon, and so just at the end of the day, we just don't have enough rooftops. The density just quite isn't. It's just not there, and I look forward to future discussions. I think that 2 years probably may be a little bit early as well, but we'll see. We're a growing community. We'll see how it's going to play out, and I appreciate Lindsay and her and the MDBA for their involvement in sort of spearheading this going forward. But you guys spent a lot of time on this, and so I wanted to say thank you for that, because that's a big deal to me, and I'm sure the rest of council as well.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just quickly respond. Thank you, Councilman Byrne. I will say we I think, are generally in good shape when the time is right. We've got a website. We've got a lot of the handout materials. I mean, I think there are some lessons learned, and as staff, we're generally ready. I mean, I think we have some things even in the next 2 years or whatever that looks like to have more conversations with some of the businesses in our area to make sure, we really are all the way ready. But I feel like we're in a pretty good shape. We've learned some lessons, and when the timing is right, I think we can really hit the ground running, if you will, and help make it a little bit more successful than it was this past year. So, but thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Caleb, again, appreciate the update. Councilmember Burnt's points were spot on. You guys have invested a lot of time on this. Just maybe a couple of thoughts. One, I hope maybe we can also provide a similar update to the Transportation Commission at their next meeting. They were the body that initially recommended that we take this on, so I think it's important that we close the loop with them.
Mark?
My question, though, Caleb, is if the committee had any discussion about if e-scooters are a business development, tourism resource, or if it's a public transit resource. Because to me, I think that distinction really ultimately determines
Where it goes.
who should maybe be driving this. And I'm grateful that the MDBA is a glutton for punishment and willing to take on scooters. I just go back to, I think, the point that I've made a couple of times is that should the city of Meridian MDBA be in the scooter business. If this is a public transit resource, we really should be working with the Highway District and VRT. Let them manage this program, and then we can, as a city, can make the determination, do we want scooters in Meridian? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, great. VRT, you manage the program. If the answer is no, then it's not something that we have to worry ourselves with. So those are my thoughts.
So, Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, that did not come up with the scoring committee, especially the VRT model. I know you've brought that up before, and I think that's something certainly I'm open to. We did, though, talk about, and Slider's model really is, at least in some of the other places that they are currently, and like he said, they're generally in the southern United States. In fact, they don't have anything north of like Arizona. They come west. They're actually outside of Chandler right now, but everything basically is in the southeast, except for a couple places in Arizona. So warm weather cities and university cities basically is where they're at now. And those places typically have public transit, and that is something we did discuss. Was there a first mile, last mile type of model? And so to get people to buses, which again, Meridian, we were just developing our first fixed route system that will go from 10 Mile through downtown to the village. So again, a little premature for even connecting people to that route. So we did talk about that, but we didn't really talk about should this be managed at a regional level through like a VRT or something like that. But we did talk about again, another one of the reasons that we aren't ready is to supplement transit, and that we again essentially don't have that transit, and these are longer trips then because we don't have transit. And with Bird, we didn't realize people riding it from downtown to 10 Mile all that often. It did happen, but those length of trip necessary, just it's typically a shorter trip, and in Meridian there isn't really a lot of short trips. It's more suburban.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor and council, I just wanted to throw one more bit of information. When Slider sent their email yesterday, just to let you know, they also stated that they did not believe they could even break even without a franchise fee. So just to clarify, when looking at the ridership information, just thought I'd pass that along.
And if I could add, I think this was alluded to in Bird's letter, if I'm not mistaken, but until some of our private business spaces allow them more readily, that too may become a driver in this conversation. And I think that may come with time, that may not come with time, but two of the largest locations don't want them on their property.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
just a comment and a question. I read an article, it was very interesting today, about these scooter companies, and most of them are still startups, and they're not necessarily profitable yet. They need venture capital. I was curious if you could give us more color as to the comment made by Bird. Were they saying that the fee model that the city had put forward wouldn't work for them, or were they saying that the city would actually have to subsidize their business model at this point for it to be profitable for them?
Their Councilwoman Strader, Council Mayor, their letter actually stated that the words they used as a non-subsidized model would not work for them in the city of Meridian.
Council, are there any further questions or comments? Do we need to have a motion to do anything specifically as it relates to the recommendation to not, or is that a staff level decision on not accepting a RFP?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think at least a acknowledgement that the process was completed and accepting the recommendation of staff to not issue a contract, I think that can be done by voice vote with the motion.
With that,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I'll be happy to make that motion. I guess a question either for legal or for staff. In that, do we want to set a date that this is going to be brought back to us? Do you want that type of direction from us, or is it when you guys feel the time is right, you'll request that it be added to an agenda?
I believe I believe our conversation with the MDBA is that they would let us know when they thought the time was right. They might have a better handle on when they believe it could be feasible in the city. That's where we left it with the evaluation committee. That was the recommendation of the evaluation committee.
If I could make at least a recommendation to the MDBA is once the Old Town lofts are completed, at least internally, see if that is a point in time on which to have that conversation.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move that we accept the shared vehicle response report from staff with our thanks to the staff and city volunteers as well as the MDBA for taking over the next iteration of this process and to bring council an updated report on or near the completion of the Old Town lofts.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I guess maybe just a caveat is that should staff continue to consider if VRT is the appropriate leader of scooter share as a whole, that could necessitate a different type of update from staff at a later point in time.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burt?
Don't necessarily disagree with that. Just a question for Mr. Cavanagh. Have you heard any discussion in regard to this at VRT meetings?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
happy to answer. I know it has been a conversation at the VRT executive board level. More as other municipalities have started to explore this. As of right now, there's only the city of Boise that offers this, so it doesn't make sense, I think, for VRT to say we're going to take over a program that Boise is successfully running. But as other municipalities maybe explore this further, I think there is a strong willingness on VRT to provide a consistent solution to the Valley residents. But outside of conversations, there's nothing. I had planned to update the executive committee at our next meeting following the action of this process, with really recognizing there's probably two paths. If the city of Meridian was reintroducing scooters, we would probably continue to further put together an MOU that we could present to the city should they want to do it. But at this point, I just don't think it's prudent for us to continue to explore it unless other jurisdictions launch a program.
Are there further questions?
Mr. Mayor, maybe some discussion on that.
Yeah. Councilman Schrader.
I'd hate for us to assume that something should go to VRT in the future if we're not at that point to make that decision. It seems appropriate to me that the Meridian Downtown Business Association come to us when they feel like the business climate will support it, and at that time we could make a decision as to whether this is something that VRT should take a look at. And I'm sure it would have to just be a back and forth conversation at that time. Does that make sense?
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Councilman Schrader, I think, yeah, we've got two paths. I appreciate and applaud MDBA for looking at it, but at the end of the day, they're focused on downtown, and if we were to implement a scooter-wide program, unless we wanted to narrowly scope it to only downtown, it could impact our entire community. So if other cities are exploring that, I think that we shouldn't wait for the Old Town lofts to be built for us to have that conversation. I think that if other cities are bringing on, and that's something VRT is open to, then that would bring a separate conversation, not from MDBA about the viability of it in downtown, but about should the city explore joining a yet-to-be designed hypothetical MOU around a region-wide scooter share program.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
That seems to make sense to me. It feels like two different discussions. Clearly, the economically viable scooter program would come from downtown, so it makes sense to me that I think we could put the ball in the court, hopefully, of the Meridian Downtown Business Association to let them know if there is a need in the market for this. And separately, hopefully, Mr. Cavanagh could let us know if in the future VRT wants to have further discussions with us on the topic. Thank you.
Okay. And if I could just also point out, since it is, we do have it would have to come through us one way or the other, since we do have a franchise requirement. So you'll be part of the conversation one way or the other with anybody. All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And we will say, again, thank you to staff for your work on this. And we will move on to item 6.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho State Code 74-2061D.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to enter executive session. If there's no discussion on the motion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh. Councilwoman Perot.
Aye.
Councilwoman Strader.
Aye.
Councilman Hoagland.
Aye.
Councilman Byrne.
Aye.
The ayes have it.